Welcome to Literary Libations with Librarians. This week we are going to be talking about our guilty pleasure reads. And first of all, I do want to preface this by saying if you are reading, you really shouldn't be feeling guilty about it. But these are the sorts of books that maybe you don't advertise as much as you do some of your other books. If you want to get your hands on any of these titles that we talk about today, all branches of the Monroe County Library System are open for curbside service, so you can start requesting through our catalog if you want a physical copy, hardcover, paperback, a CD to listen to for an audiobook, large print. Our catalog address is on your screen right now. You can also request some of these items digitally via one of the provided apps through MCLS. And there is Overdrive/Libby. Libby is the name of the app. Overdrive is maybe what you'll see as their logo. And they provide ebooks and downloadable audiobooks. You can also use Hoopla, which provides ebooks, downloadable audiobooks, and also movies, music, and graphic novels. And you can also use RB Digital, which provides downloadable audiobooks and also magazines and week-long passes to Acorn TV and the Great Courses. And the best thing about Hoopla and RB Digital is if you see an item in those apps, you can get it immediately. There is never a wait for those. All right, with us this week are 5 Monroe County Library staff that I'm going to introduce here. And let's start with Kelly Venier. She's the branch technician at the South Rockwood Library. And this week for our introductory question, we're going to talk about what our guilty pleasure pastimes are. So Kelly, what is your guilty pleasure pastime? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. I had a really hard time thinking about this because I don't really, I had to really think about what my guilty pleasure is, but after thinking about it, my guilty pleasure would be watching dating documentaries. So my newest one is Love is Blind, and also Dating Around on Netflix. I can't get enough of those shows. I can't, Love is Blind, I heard they were starting a new season in Chicago, but I don't know now with COVID and everything how that's going to go down. But Dating Around has been really promising. They go on 5 dates and there's only 1 second date. It's pretty awesome. So I
watched Love is Blind because shortly you're going to hear about my guilty pleasure. And I love the couple that ended up actually getting married. I can't think of their names now. Or am I thinking of the wrong show? Because this is the one where they meet in the room and they can't see each other.
Yes.
I can't think of the couple's name.
Was it the younger couple, Amber, and was it that guy?
I don't remember, but they have a YouTube channel. Now I feel really bad because I subscribed to their YouTube channel and like they made it through quarantine together. Now I feel super bad. I don't feel that bad, but I feel a little bad.
It was so good. There was another one too that I watched, but I can't think of it right now, but it was where they get married right away. Like they have experts that pair them together and they get married and then they have like 12 weeks to decide if they want to stay married or get divorced. There's like 9 seasons of that one. That was a good one too.
Good times. I love your guilty pleasure because it plays into also my guilty pleasure. All right. Also with us this week, we have Jen McCarty, who is a reference librarian at the Ellis Branch Library. And what is your guilty pleasure pastime, Jen?
Well, I'm a child, like full on. Every thought that I had for this, I was like, should I mention my love of cartoons? I don't feel that bad about it. But so my background here kind of shows you, I collect toys. These are different pictures from, I'm looking behind me like they're really there. They're not. It's just pictures. But these are some pictures of the things currently on my work desk. I surprisingly do work there, even though there's mostly toys. And I have more at home. Most of what I have at work are Funko Pops. If you're not familiar with those, basically if you like anything, there's a Funko for it. And if you can tell, I have quite a few. I have an insane amount on my desk at work. I have a handful at home, but some of my favorites are Harry Potter. I can't see what actually I have on there. I have a whole bunch of Disney ones. They serve no purpose. They're silly, but I love them. And
they make you happy. That's a purpose.
They bring me joy. That's become what, people buy me for presents and whatnot. And that's sort of my guilty pleasure is I am a child and I collect toys.
Nice. Who doesn't love a good toy?
Obviously, not me. I mean.
All right. Also with us today, we have Amy Luck, and she is one of the front desk staff at the Dorsch Library. And what is your guilty pleasure pastime, Amy?
Well, this was very hard for me too, because I don't feel guilty about very much. I like to buy paper and other things to use on my Cricut. So currently I probably have stacks and stacks of paper for my Cricut. And since we were just able to start shopping again, that's what I did. I went out and bought paper, just pretty paper. And then when I'm not doing that, I like to go get ice cream.
Ice cream is excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent, thank you. And we also have with us Mandy Draganic, who is a cataloger in our collections department, and make sure when you get into our catalog and you type in what you're looking for, that good stuff is going to show up for you. And Mandy, what is your guilty pleasure pastime?
Well, at first I was thinking along Amy's lines because I do like to buy yarn, but eventually I do use it. So probably not the guilty part there. So I'm thinking disaster movies. Like the worse they are, the more I like them. The more ridiculous they are, the more I like them, and the more times I will watch them over and over and over. So
are we thinking along like Sharknado lines?
Sure. Sharknado, Twister, the Day After Tomorrow. My favorite probably is the Poseidon Adventure. I love both versions. So
excellent. People in distress.
Yeah.
Sharknado is cinematic masterpiece. So there's no shame in that.
All 17 of them.
I was going to say there's like a bajillion of them.
Better than the last.
All right, and I am Jennifer Graneski. I am the branch librarian at the Dundee branch. And if you happen to recognize my background, that will give you a hint into my guilty pleasure. This is where women or men come, and usually there's like 30 of them, to meet one person of the opposite sex because, after spending literally like 3 hours with them, they're going to propose and get married and romance will happen. So yes, I have a reality television problem. I still watch The Amazing Race and Survivor, and I love Love is Blind. I watch Love Island if you have Hulu. Yeah, I have a problem. I know it's not good for me. I know my brain cells are dying. My husband mocks me. It's terrible, and yet it's one way for my brain to just shut off entirely. So yeah, so this is the Bachelor Mansion. This is the outside where they meet and greet, usually on the first night. So that's my guilty pleasure.
Do you get obsessed with them like I do? Like, do you go to bed and think about their lives and like what they're doing, or like at the end, do you like Google them to see if they stay together like I do? Because I get like really obsessive about them.
I will usually Google to find out if they stay together. Although for the Bachelor and Bachelorette, I usually don't care. But I will say what I tend to do, particularly because I won't out my staff member who also watches the show with me. But what she and I have discussed is that particularly these professional young women, and the men too, they need their moms or their grandmas with them. So when they're gonna make a terrible mistake, or when they're sobbing because this person whom they've spent maybe 3 hours with rejects them, mom or grandma can tell them, honey, you're better than this. You go get those Instagram dollars for being on this show and you just move on, okay? That's what I think, because I'm old enough now that I'm like, yeah, never going to be on a show like this. Although, really, I should never be on a show like that ever. Nobody wants to watch me. But also, I'm busy thinking of mom advice for these young people. You know, like, honey, you need to wear a different color. Honey, probably having that many drinks before going on a date, not a good choice. You know, like,
little short, yeah.
Yeah. So those are the sorts of things that I'm telling that are going on in my head. Like, how can I help these poor folks that have made the decision to do this with their lives? So, yeah. So, all right. So those are our guilty pleasures. We've introduced ourselves, and now we're going to start talking about books that are guilty pleasures. And who would like to get us started? Don't all go at once. All right, Jen McCarty raised her hand. Jen will get us started. Thank you.
I'll start us off this week. So my two choices are drastically different. The first book that I chose as a guilty pleasure read is Angus, Thongs, and Full Frontal Snogging by Louise Renison. And if you're not familiar with this book, which you may not be, it's a YA, it's a British author, so the people are British. That's where we get full frontal snogging. Angus is a cat. Thongs are underwear, as you would probably expect. Snogging, if you're not familiar, is a British term for kissing. So this book follows Georgia Nicholson, who is a 14-year-old girl, and like most 14-year-old girls, she's very typical, you know, obsessed with her friends and boys. It's a lot of boys. So the book starts with Georgia and her friend's got a crush on this boy, and she wants to kind of, you know, let's check this kid out. Well, Georgia ends up meeting Robbie, and he's older, and he's super hot, and she nicknames him the sex god, which is a little scandalous coming from a 14-year-old. And it's just this sort of little world where she's obsessed with getting this older boy to like her. And there's all these other little things in there. You know, there's another boy who gives out free kissing lessons. So of course I want to sign up for those. Her cat Angus is giant and he's kind of awful. And, you know, at one point he gets away and that's a whole thing. And she's got a little sister who she likes, but she's 3 and she's kind of gross and kind of smelly. And her dad has been out of work. So they're talking about moving from the UK to New Zealand. And who wants that? It's just very, very teen girl angsty, and it's funny. There's a whole series, but you know, this was the first book. They're really funny. It's a little bit cheesy at times, but it's also, if you're a teen girl or you've ever been a teen girl, you can probably relate to her a lot of her stuff. You know, these books have been challenged because, I mean, like I said, she calls the kid the sex god. She's also a typical 14-year-old girl where she, you know, argues with her parents and she's a little disrespectful. And so like these books have been challenged a lot because of some of that content, but they're just fun. And I remember reading this not as a 14-year-old girl. I was definitely an adult the first time I read Georgia Nicholson, but I loved it just because I thought it was just so much fun. But it's a little bit of a cheesy, you know, Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging. You want to be reading that in front of a lot of people.
Sure.
So that's my first guilty read. Next one, definitely adult, is Dark Lover by J.R. Ward. And Dark Lover is the first book in the Black Decker Brotherhood series. Along with a lot of my recommendations or the things I talk about, it's fantasy, it's vampires. But it's a totally different vampire book in that these vampires are a separate species from humans. So they don't actually prey on humans. They still drink blood, but they drink blood from each other. They have to drink from the opposite sex of their vampire. And the first book follows Wrath. Awesome name. I'm going to talk about the names a little bit. Wrath is the king of the vampires. Very reluctantly, he doesn't want to be king, and he also is the head of the Black Dagger Brotherhood. And what the Black Dagger Brotherhood is like another sect within the vampires of like warrior vampires, and they protect the vampire population from discovery by humans, but also there's another group that wants to rid all the vampires. There's kind of been this like, you know, millennial long war between these different people. So the first book, Wrath, our reluctant king meets a young half vampire girl named Beth, who hasn't transitioned into her vampirehoodness, and he doesn't want anything to do with her, but of course, sparks fly.
As they are wont to do.
This is a paranormal romance, emphasis on the romance. And it's a little, if you are someone who is a little scandalized, you don't want to read these books because they're detailed. They're detailed. But these books are,
they are happening.
I've read several of them. I haven't read them all. But they're super, there's a weird cheesiness to it. All of the warriors have awful names. The king's name is Wrath, W-R-A-T-H. There's a guy named Rage, R-H-A-G-E. They're all spelled weird. There's Vicious, and I think there's an S-H in it. There's
anger.
Yeah.
Why are they so angry?
Yeah. There's Zadist, like sadist, but with a Z.
But with a Z.
Yeah. It's terrible. And I've read multiple of these.
There's something about the terror. I have not read these, but when I talk about my books, one in particular, it's not well written. But there's something about it that every time I'm like, oh, I'm gonna pick it up, read it in 2 hours.
They're not particularly badly written, but they're out there. I don't think it was this particular book, but I'm pretty sure it was a book in this series that I was reading one night at home, and I'm like in bed reading. Oh, I got my book. I'm reading a book. It's a library book. My husband comes in and is like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And nothing. I'm not doing anything because they're really sexy. So if you're turned off by that, these are not the books for you. But if it's something that you enjoy, and you want a little, vampire love,
you never know.
The Black Dagger Brotherhood series gives it to you. So
Great.
those are my guilty reads.
Thank you. All right. Who would like to go next?
I'll go.
All right, Mandy.
So I'll follow up Jen's vampire romance with my guilt-free romance. So there was a time that maybe I would have read something like that. I don't know. And then I made some choices in my life, and I've changed a lot of things. So I do still enjoy a romantic comedy, but I can't do the vampire love story things anymore. So I actually found this author several years ago. Her name is Bethany Turner, and she writes Christian romantic comedies. They're not the best written books I've ever read. There are some issues sometimes with her character development, maybe, but they're lighthearted, they're fun, they are romantic, they're generally love stories that kind of hook you, and they're clean. So Secret Life of Sarah Hollenbeck was the first one I read, and I believe it was her first romantic comedy novel. And it's about Sarah, who is newly divorced, and she was kind of a trophy wife, and so she really doesn't even know what to do with her time. So she decides to try her hand at writing, and she writes some poetry, and it's not great. And she tries again. She writes a romance novel of the more scandalous kind, and it's a wild hit. She becomes crazy popular. She writes under a pen name, and she needs a little something else to do, so she joins a book club. All the ladies in the book club love this romance author, and they talk about her all the time, and they have no idea that she is that same author. Along the line, she makes a friend in Piper, and they hang out and they do some things, and Piper takes her to church, and she becomes a Christian, and she falls in love eventually with Ben, who just happens to be the pastor. So she has to fess up to Ben and Piper, right? That she is in fact the scandalous romance novel. And there's some strains on the relationship, and There's some issues with being judgmental, and I won't tell you how it works out because it's fun. It's fun and funny, and it's just a quick. I can kind of feel guilty, but I don't really have to feel guilty about it. The other one is, I think, her newest novel, and it is called Hadley Beckett's Next Dish. Hadley is a celebrity chef, and she's kind of a real sweet, down-to-earth Tennessee gal. She meets up with Max, who is not. He's not sweet. He's not down-to-earth. He's rude and obnoxious. He's a big city guy. They're on a celebrity like competition, chef competition show. He apparently is drunk and wigs out, and that's kind of the end of his career for a little while. He goes off to rehab, and they both are invited to join. It's like the best of the best chefs shows. They will feature the best chef for an entire season and talk about their life and their cooking and all this stuff. Well, they're invited to do the show together. They don't really like each other, so they don't really want to do it together, but they both want to be on this show. So Max, his character is transformed. He's a little less obnoxious, a little less of a jerk, and big surprise, some sparks fly. Pretty predictable, but again, it's fun, it's funny, it's lighthearted, it's clean. There it is. Those are my guilt-free guilty pleasures.
I love that you have guilt-free guilty pleasures.
Right?
That's so fun.
Don't.
It gives options for everybody, which is what we're here to do.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mandy. All right, Kelly and Amy, who wants to go next?
I'll go because I'm going to split up the romance with psychos. My guilty pleasure is reading psychological fiction, and I think it's because I like to read about people who just lose their mind and are just like do some really crazy stuff. So the first one is Sometimes I Lie by Ellis Feeny, and it's about Amber Reynolds. She wakes up in a hospital and she can hear everything around her, but she can't move, she can't talk. She's in a coma, actually. So the book starts out saying, my name is Amber Reynolds. There are 3 things you should know about me. 1, I'm in a coma. 2, my husband doesn't love me anymore. And 3, sometimes I lie. So the book goes back and forth between present, hearing what's going on. She knows something terrible happened, but she can't remember what it is or why she's in there. She's afraid of her husband. And then someone comes in and says, you know, you did this to yourself. And she doesn't know what they're talking about. But then the book goes between her present coma and her diaries from as she was growing up. And you never know, is she lying in this part or is this part true? And there's a lot of twists and turns and you think you have it figured out and then something just crazy happens. And if you like psychological fictions, I think you'll like this one. You just never knew until the end, and then your mouth is hanging open going, what? So, and she really was crazy. She was kind of crazy, and you just say, wow, I'm glad I'm not like that.
Phew.
Ooh, yeah.
I love psychological fiction. I also have a horror issue too. I enjoy both. So I love hearing new recommendations because there's a lot out there right now. So I love hearing when somebody's like, no, this is a good one. It really made my jaw drop. So that's awesome.
Yeah, well, the next one isn't really psychological fiction, but it's called A Good Killing. And it's the first time I read a book where someone was killed and they're trying to figure out what happened when I said, oh my gosh, that really was a good killing. So I approved of them killing this man, but it's an Anna Curtis series by Allison Leota, and it's actually number 4 in the series, and I just picked it up because I liked the title and the cover, and it didn't hurt that I didn't read the first 3, and I will go back and read them, but this was a good book to read even though it was number 4. So Anna Curtis is a lawyer, and she is a attorney in Washington, D.C., but her sister lives in Detroit. So her sister is the prime suspect in this murder of the hometown hero football coach, or, from the high school. And she comes back to help her through the process and defend her. And the things you find out about him along the way are disturbing, but the way it came about him killing had a lot to do with several different women, and they kind of all got together, and you aren't really sure exactly what happened, and they I can't think what I was going to say here, but it's he deserves to be killed. He really does. And I don't say that lightly because I don't wish death on anyone, but he's good. So that is a great series to read if you just like suspense. And that the guilty pleasure comes in because it shouldn't be a pleasure that you find someone was murdered. And the way they murder him is pretty inventive too. So so read that, and there's actually, I think, 5 books in that series right now. So Allison Leota, Anna Curtis series, and The Good Killing.
Nice. So if you're looking for another suspense series, there's another one to add to your list.
I just don't read any romance, so I didn't have that kind of way to go. So
no, I think that's great. Everybody's guilty pleasures are different, so that's great. Some people it's the love, some people it's the romantic comedy. For you, psycho killers.
Yeah.
Everybody's got their thing.
Hey.
Thank you, Amy. And I lost Kelly momentarily. She's coming back. There she is.
Here I am.
And Kelly.
So I had a hard time with this too because I like serial killers, and but I thought that would kind of be a downer, so I steered away from that. No offense, Amy.
No offense taken.
Also, as a former children's librarian, it's kind of my deep, dark secret, so I was like, I better keep that in my pocket for a little bit longer, although I guess I just spilled it. But I picked 2 series that I'm obsessed with and that I feel like I could go back and read again and again and again. I don't know that they're really so guilty. Maybe the first one that I'm going to talk about kind of is, well, no, I guess the second one if I'm going off the screen here. So the first series is the Lunar Chronicles. And these are futuristic retellings of classic fairy tales. I'm not usually a sci-fi reader. It's not a genre that I usually go to, but when I heard Marissa Meyer talk at one of the conferences I was able to go to, I was really intrigued, especially by the cover. So Cinder is the first of the series, and Cinder is a teenage cyborg, so she's half human and half machine, and she starts or plans to start a rebellion against the evil Queen Lavanna while dealing with a wicked stepmother and her uncertain feelings about a handsome prince. And as the series continues with more relationships, Cinder forges alliances with Scarlet, a spaceship pilot who has a quest of her own, Cress, a computer hacker who is imprisoned by Queen Lavanna, and a princess named Winner who is in love with a commoner and soon discovers that her alliance or her allegiance with these characters may hold the key to saving her kingdom and even the world. So it was, I guess because it's guilty for me because it's sci-fi and I had a hard time enjoying it as much as I did because I'm like, I'm not a sci-fi reader, I'm realistic fiction or historical fiction. But I really love this series. I listened to all of them on audio and I would highly recommend it. The narrator is amazing. But the whole series, there's six in the series. It covers all the characters. The characters are well-rounded. They all fit in with the retelling of the fairy tale. So they retell Cinderella. Scarlet is the second one in the series, and that is Red Riding Hood. She even falls in love with a street fighter named Wolf. Cress is the third one, and she is Rapunzel. And then Winter is the version of Snow White. So it was a really good series, and I loved comparing them. And the characters travel throughout the entire series, which is another thing that I loved because they're so great. I fell in love with them all. So that's a great series.
About it too.
Yeah.
Have you read those, Mandy?
I have, yeah.
They're so good. And there's a little bit of everything. Like there's that sci-fi, futuristic, there's a little bit of romance, there's a lot of action. And I think that I mean, it's perfectly wrapped up in that whole series. So the second series that I love, this one probably is a little bit more guilty because it's just trash. But it's the Lux
Trash with a beautiful cover.
It really is. And I even printed out a paper so that you could look at the cover more closely while I'm talking because I think this should just be on forever. All the books in the series have a different dress or a different character in one of these huge dresses. But the Lux series by Anna Gaberson, I actually took the description of this because I was like, man, there's so many things I want to say. And then I got on HarperCollins' website to read the description, and I just stole it because it's so good. So pretty girls in pretty dresses, partying until dawn, irresistible boys with mischievous smiles and dangerous intentions, white lies, dark secrets, and scandalous hookups. This is Manhattan, 1899. So it's basically Gossip Girl, but in 1899 with large dresses and, a world of luxury and appearance matters, and breaking any kind of social code means running the risk of being ostracized forever. 5 teenagers lead a dangerous life, and you go through the whole series learning their ins and outs and, what they're doing that's not great.
It's people making bad decisions.
Yes.
Which will also lead into my guilty pleasures. Like,
So good though.
Let's make every bad decision, but they get to do it in these gorgeous dresses.
I know. I mean, look at this. Can I just wear this every day?
Please do.
And then she describes their dresses, and then they're like comparing each other's dresses. Like she's got the new puff or ruffle or whatever. I remember when those came out, and I was like, I whipped through as many of them as I could, however many were out at the time, and read all of them. And
is it book 2 that has the red dress?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's my favorite.
Just rumors.
Just for the cover.
Yeah.
Like I don't remember what happens in the book, but
I know.
Yeah,
I could just frame these on my wall. Like honestly, they're just gorgeous.
Yeah.
And then I was super sad in the I don't know if it's the downloadable audio or it's the ebook. They've removed that cover. They don't have the beautiful dresses. It's just like the words, and it's stylized like from the 1800s. And I was like,
that's wrong.
Yeah,
that's the dress.
Make the book like that. I think that was even why either you had told me about them, Jennifer, or maybe it was even the covers where I was like, this is amazing. Yes. I need to read this.
I just need this book.
Yeah.
Look at the cover.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great series. So, and it flies by. It's good.
It really does.
And if you're not a historical romance or a historical reader, period, they don't read historically at all because it's scandalous.
It is scandalous.
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm not sure I'd take my history from the Lux series.
Probably not.
I'd be a little concerned. I'm sure some of it is real. New York existed in the 1800s, but I'm not sure about the rest of it. But I did really love it because they are always breaking these conventions. And the other thing I loved is that you think it's going to end up with the predictable person, like this person really loves this person. And even though, you know, trials happen, they're going to end up together. Nope. Nope, they make terrible decisions.
Yeah.
It's good. All right. Thank you, Kelly.
Mhm.
And my guilty pleasures, I'm going to start out here with the Pretty Little Liars series. So I read this and picked it up. I think I just liked the covers again because the earlier covers are all little Barbie dolls, and I don't know, sometimes you just want something easy to read because this was prior to it becoming a TV series, and I have still never watched the TV series. But I have read every single one of the 16 books in this series, much to my sort of shame. So to give you a little synopsis, first of all, I just love that in the synopsis, that is the publisher's synopsis, in capital letters, all caps, it says, everyone has something to hide. Everyone, apparently, everyone has something to hide. And this particular series focuses on 4 young women. They are juniors in high school, and they all have secrets. But the biggest secret has to do when their 5th friend, Allison, perished in a fire. And now they're starting to receive texts and letters from the secret person that's just calling themselves A, and who is going to reveal their secrets to everybody unless they do what A wants. And so the first 8 books in the series follows that story arc. And at the end of that 8th book, you do find out who A is. And the first 8 books I thoroughly enjoyed. They are way over the top, soap opera-y. Again, young people making terrible decisions, but really enjoyable. And then roundabout when the 8th book was released, the television series also started. And so this whole series got another boost of publicity. And when that happened, I don't know if it was the publisher's idea, if it was the author's idea, but a decision was made that, well, we need to add more books to the series so that they keep selling. So then they added an additional 8 books to the series. And those last 8 books are awful. Really, really bad. Like the first 8 aren't great literature, but they're at least enjoyable to just kind of like go through and go, oh my goodness, that was dumb, and then keep reading. The last 8 are just, you just start wanting to poke everybody in the eyes. Maybe they need to know a little, don't do that. Because by the time you're getting into the books, these 4 young women are now in college and they've been stalked by no less than 3 or 4 people. So you would think that, hey, stranger coming into my life that wants to take me alone somewhere, maybe don't do that. Don't do that, young women. Don't do that. Think before you make your decisions, but they don't. And so, yeah, but in going back and reading my reviews for all 16 of the books, you can hear, you know, in the first ones, I'm like, oh, this is so fun. It's silly, but I'm addicted to them. And then by the end, the next to last book, I said, I'm now rooting for A, the villain who's been killing people. I think she or he should just take out these 4 dim bulbs completely. And also, possibly A should also take out the author and the publisher, and probably me for not having stopped reading these books 7 books ago. So if you decide, listen, I love soap opera, I love fun, I love over-the-top thrillers, pick up the books, but stop after book 8. Don't go on. Just, it'll be really tempting because you'll be like, ooh, I want that thrill again. Don't do it, man. Stop. Book 8, just stop. And I can't speak to the TV series.
I love that not only did you read, like, you know, you continued reading, but you continued reading.
Yes. like no. Because and during those last 8 books, I start saying in my reviews, I don't know why I'm reading this. I don't know why I'm reading this. And yet the next one came out and I'm like, nope, gotta read it. I don't know if you've heard the term hate watching. Like some people will watch television shows because it's so terrible, and so they enjoy hating on it because it's that bad. I'm pretty sure that's how I felt. Like, I'm going to read this book so I can write a terrible review about it. So in some way, it still ended up bringing me some sort of guilty pleasure because I read them all. But I read them all so that you don't have to stop at book 8. Don't read 16 of them. All right, my other guilty pleasure has to do with my pastime one. And that is Amy Kaufman's Bachelor Nation. Amy Kaufman was a producer on The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, and so she's got the inside scoop. And if you also are a Bachelor, Bachelorette watcher and you wonder why you do it, as I do, because you know this is degrading to everyone involved, the men, the women, those of us watching it, like this is not a good thing for anyone, and yet you keep watching it, you can join me because I keep watching it. And she talks a little bit in there about why we do that. And some of that is just escapism. You know, it's beautiful people and beautiful clothes and beautiful places. So it's just an escape. You turn off your brain, they can go do their thing and you can have a giggle. And some of it is voyeurism, just to see how other people live. Some of it is, and this is terrible, but some of it is judgmentalism, where you're just like, well, at least I didn't make that terrible decision with my life. And now let me go help them and give them advice about it. And some of it is also the sense of connection and community, because if you find somebody else that also watches The Bachelor and Bachelorette, you can discuss all the ins and outs of it about why did they keep so-and-so, because that was a terrible decision. So she does go into some of the psychology behind watching television shows like The Bachelor and Bachelorette, but then she also goes into all of the producer shenanigans. These shows are super manipulated. And in the contract, this sort of blew my mind, in the contract that you signed to go on the show, you give them permission, and I don't remember the exact words, but you give them permission that you could be falsely represented. They can't put you on screen saying or doing something you didn't actually do, but they could produce it or edit it in such a way that the context is gone. And so suddenly they've put you into a different context entirely. So you might end up looking like a huge jerk, and you really weren't, because they're taking every point at which maybe you were super stressed, or maybe you drank too much and they weren't paying attention to that, or maybe you didn't get to eat lunch that day and so you haven't eaten since yesterday. And they're going to take all those moments where you're super angry or super rude or whatever, and they're going to put all of those out, where with Bob over there, who you might have really not liked, they're going to take all of his best moments, because they know Bob ends up with the Bachelorette, and so they need to make sure Bob looks super good, because nobody wants the Bachelorette with a jerk. That's literally in the contract that you are agreeing to, that you could be falsely represented. So they know what they're signing up for, and that makes me super sad, but it doesn't make me sad enough not to stop. Someday I need help. I need like a reality TV group that says, okay, we're not going to watch. And then we all go and watch anyhow, and then we can talk about it together. So, but it was a really interesting book. If you watch reality TV and have any interest in the dark underbelly of it, it is there. And it does talk about some of the other issues with the show, the sexism, the racism, that is all there. So I think she takes a pretty honest look at all of the sides of it. And it was a good read. It was super quick. So those are my 2 guilty pleasure reads. So now you know, now you can judge me. I'm cool with that. I'm okay with it. I've admitted it. So thank you, all of you, for participating in our guilty pleasure reads talk. And next week we are talking about books that you wish you could live in. So think about those books, historical books, fantasy books, science fiction books. Where would you want to live in those books? And that's what we'll be discussing next week. Thank you to Jen, Amy, Kelly, and Mandy for joining us this week. Thank you to all of you who listened. Hope you added some titles to your list, and I hope you have great weeks. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.